Welcome to Parenthood Unscripted, where honest conversations about raising kids take center stage. I'm your host, Samantha Taylor, speech language pathologist, business owner, and mom of two. Each episode, I sit down with professionals and real parents to talk about the parts of parenting we don't always say out loud, the challenges, the growth, the joy, and everything in between. Whether you're looking for connection, perspective, or simply to feel less alone, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Before we jump in, I want to share something for any parent who has ever left an IEP meeting feeling overwhelmed, unheard, or unsure of what to do next. The Advocacy Accelerator is officially open for enrollment. This is a step-by-step support experience designed to help parents feel confident without second-guessing themselves or doing it alone. Inside, you'll also be part of a community of parents who get it, because advocacy shouldn't feel isolating and you don't have to figure it all out in real time. If you want to learn more or join us, you can head to the link in the show notes. Now let's get to the episode. I am so grateful and thankful to have Dr. Ann McIntosh back with us for a third time. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. It's good to be here again today.
We have had so many great conversations that I didn't want to end quite yet. I have some more questions for you today and kind of diving right in. In either the first or second episode, you had mentioned the phrase about deafness being a superpower, and I'd love to understand more what you meant by that.
I do think that deafness is a superpower, but I didn't always think that, and I don't think that everybody's in that spot. It is something that I had to become aware of over time because as a young person, my brain was malleable and I was a sponge and I was taking in around me. And what I took in around me is that deafness is a disability. That deafness is something that needs to be compensated for, and that there is a little bit of a less than on that. There are some, Patty Ladd has talked a little bit about deaf gain, and we've heard that term deaf gain in the deaf community. And it's something similar to that, but I perceive that we have to get there, kind of like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We have to experience something and we have to work through deafness as a disability to get to deafness is a superpower. And what I mean by that for me is the different lens of how to see the world. Because as we had said in some of our earlier conversations, you're so adept to problem solving. You're so adept to pivoting and moving and adapting. And that is a wonderful characteristic to have in a changing world. So when we're on the computer or when we're doing AI and all that, we just see how fast our world is changing. So having that ability is very critical and it's useful. But the other part of that deaf superpower is the lenses is hearing with our heart, hearing with our minds, hearing with our experiences, hearing with our eyes, all those things coming together, and it can make up for what we might not be getting through the sense of the ears. And that's really important because when you only see things from one angle, you're only going to get that one angle perspective. So switching over. And where I really came to internalize that was I was doing some reading. I teach college, I teach public speaking, and I had a student who was identified as dyslexic. And she wanted to study dyslexia for herself to understand more about herself and then to create several presentations where she would explain that to her classmates what dyslexia is and how it works. And through that process, I was kind of doing some research alongside her, and I learned that 25% of the engineers at NASA are dyslexic, 1 in 4. And I'm like, that's not a disability. Why are we calling this a disability? It is a different wiring of the brain. We don't call left-handed people disabled, but basically it's a right-handed world. Most people are right-handed. But there are some people who are left-handed, and they do perceive and do things a little differently, and that's helpful for us. And I think dyslexia is like that, and deafness as well. So I understand we think of it as a disability. We're taught that. We see that in so many words in labeling, but really go deeper and beyond that. And it really does become your superpower in the sense that when you pivot, you see it differently. You begin to see just how much more powerful you are, and it empowers you to do wonderful things. So deafness, it's taken a while, but It definitely is a superpower.
I love those examples and that explanation because you're right. As a left-handed person, I know the world was very much made for right-handed people, but it's a difference. I come at things from a different perspective. I have a different angle. Speaking about like deafness, my son comes at things from a different perspective, a different angle. And not to discount that he did go through a process where he was angry about it. When he was about 10 or so, I remember very vividly one night when I was tucking him into bed, he was so angry with me. And I wasn't sure why. I didn't know anything that happened. I thought we had a good day. And he goes to me, he said to me, he's like, I hate that I'm deaf. I hate that you're hearing. So he very much went through that process of seeing how he was different, but he was looking at it through a lens of lack. Whereas through time and kind of really finding his own footing and who he is, it really is a superpower. It is a strength of his. And he's so proud of who he is. We're so proud of who he is. And deafness is a piece of him, but it's not all of him. And
Right.
it's a really major strength in terms of just who he is, how he shows up in the world, but also different abilities that he has. He is an incredible artist. His visual spatial reasoning is out of this world. And then another little side thing that it made me think of, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dave Pilkey, but he is an author. He writes children's books. He does Captain Underpants and Catboy, things like that. But he has ADHD, and he talks about how in elementary school, how he was kind of shunned for it. He was the outcast for it. And really, that was his greatest superpower because he's so creative. He has ideas and stories for days. So I love the idea of looking at things through a different lens. And it's not a disability, it's a difference. And we're all different. And that's what makes the world so wonderful is we all have different lenses, different skills, different perspectives that we come at things. So I love that. And so I know we're talking about the positives, but a lot of parents listening may be scared or uncertain right now for whatever they may have on their plate, whether it's a diagnosis, disability, fear, whatever it might be. What would you want to say directly to them?
First, that's normal. That's what mom and dad do. They're concerned about the kiddo. So to not dismiss that and to minimize that, that is certainly understandable. Second, the children are going to be fine. They're going to grow up and they're going to be a-okay. As long as we keep that open mind and we get different perspectives and embrace what's right for my child, what's right for our relationship and for our family and for our educational setting, that will be really useful. But the other piece, the third piece, and probably the most important piece is don't leave your child out of the decision making. Just because you're the parent doesn't mean you need to make all the decisions based on just your perspective. Include your child. So you can say things like, I'm frustrated about X, Y, and Z. How can we work on that? Or I'm not sure what to do about. Many times the kids have fantastic responses and answers, and it tells you where their mindset is going so that you can travel together and collaborate together towards a solution. So many times as parents, I think we feel like we have to come up with the responsibility because we're the adult, they're the minors, and they're too young to understand and they're too young to take, but they're not too young to give input.
Yeah. Well, and also they don't have all of the baggage that we have as adults. So they have more, sometimes a clearer idea of what's going on or a clearer route to a solution because they don't have all of that baggage.
Mhm.
And again, I always tie it kind of back to my situation with my son. It makes me think of when he was transitioning to a mainstream school half days. I was terrified. I was so worried. I'm like, you're going to be isolated. You're only going to be able to talk through your interpreter. And I had all of these fears. But through talking to him, because I brought him in on the conversation, I realized those were my fears. They were not his fears. And so it really helped me to gain perspective of, I don't want to project this onto him because he's really excited about this. And it's not an actual fear. It's just, or it's not an actual hindrance, but it's my fear kind of stepping in the way. So I think it's great including your kids because it also helps gain or give you perspective on the
Mhm.
situation.
And it keeps those communication lines open, and
Yeah.
that's critical.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, especially with parents, we're making decisions for our children that impact them. So we want to include them because no one's more invested in them than they are. So because it's their life. So I love
They're going
that.
to be living with our decisions. Mhm.
Exactly. Exactly. So we've talked a little bit about schools and healthcare and society. Um, and there's a lot of great things happening, but I'm curious your thoughts on what you think still needs to change in those areas like schools, healthcare, and society.
A lot needs to change. A lot. Where do we start? We start with, as we have just alluded, involving the deaf and hard of hearing. Don't exclude them. So what would be some practical, real tangible ways we can do that? Let's say in healthcare, the hospital could have a patient advocacy board, and a deaf adult or a young teenage deaf or hard of hearing could serve on that board to provide that lens. I think that would be really critical. We can do that in healthcare, in dental care. On the school, involving them in some of the adult decisions, letting them sit in on some of those meetings. Maybe not have a vote, but having the ability to have input. That's a great way to groom leaders and so forth for them to see what's going on, and they'll see what they like, they'll see what's not working, and they can learn a lot from that process. But I would say that that is something that we can do that needs to be changed. We need to have more input in the with the representation, and also hold them accountable for that. So when they come up with these ideas and everything, give them the freedom and the latitude to be able to implement some of that and to work with them. Every idea might not be 100% great, but if 80% of it works well, you can tap into that and you can expand and you can pivot, you can move and improve and so on and so forth. But I would really listen to what they have to say and incorporate that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too about not every idea might be 100%, but if there's even nuggets in there that might get the creative process going so that more ideas come of it, you really will end up leaps and bounds ahead versus if you never included them in the first place or had those conversations or trusted their judgment. Because a lot is to be said when you feel like you have the freedom to take those risks and those chances and really expand on it. So I think that is really important. And I'm kind of curious too, kind of piggybacking off of that, what could parents do to help culminate some of those features of a good leader? Um, like in our children, I just think, for example, for my son, some things that we did was we put him in different opportunities. We would put him in different positions where he had to really stretch his brain, things like that. And I think that helped him be a little more comfortable with being uncomfortable, things like that. But what are some things parents can do to help push their children into expanding who they are in terms of like leadership, things like that?
Um, Being open to nurturing where their interest lies. So let's say a family worship has a faith base. Does that child go to Sunday school? Do they go to youth group? Are they opening up and they're going to be voting for president and secretary and all that? Does your child have that interest? Rather than say, "Oh, don't do that," let them do it. If they win, great. If they don't win, hey, that's life. Sometimes we go after stuff and we get it. Sometimes we go after stuff and we don't. But then they do it, and then if they do win, it's like how are they going to communicate? They're going to figure that out. The others will help in and figure that out. So I wouldn't be saying don't do this and this because we know of all the things that can go wrong. That's okay. If the world was utopia, we wouldn't be challenged to do anything if everything was perfect. So the reason we get up, put our pants on every day and go to work is because we're trying to make things better. So if your child wants to do Girl Scouts, if they want to do Boy Scouts, allow them, but it's not deaf, they don't have interpreters. Let's see what happens with that. Now, if there's enough Scout that are interested and were at a deaf school or something like that, and there's a leader who can sign, then that may emerge, as a solution there. But I would say to parents, let your child do what they want to do, and they may find something very, very interesting that doesn't necessarily involve other people, where you might have communication issues. For example, you may have a yard and they may get interested in flowers or in growing vegetables or something like that. They may go online and read about 4-H and do those kind of things. So I would kind of do that. I was raised in an era where mom and dad put you out at night or put you out in the day and you didn't come home till night. You figured out what you were going to do. So it's not so much the structure, and researchers are now saying that when we structure too much of our children's day, they don't build in resiliency skills, they don't build in problem solving, that sometimes too much of a good thing can be harmful. So I would say leave that open for your child to go in and to figure out what they want to do.
Yeah, yeah, and letting them explore and figure out who they are too. So is so important because they may be interested in something you've never heard of. So, for example, my son, again, he's really into like technology. I know nothing about technology. So, if I were to kind of pick his interest for him or pick where he's focusing his attention, I would never even give him access to what he's passionate about or what he's really good at. So I think, yeah, I love that. Um, so there are lots of different components to being a deaf and hard of hearing child. And I'm wondering if you could fix one major issue for children tomorrow, what would it be?
Allow them to have a seat at the table. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So I would say let them be as involved in their life to take charge of their life as opposed to sitting them out and making those choices for them. All the things that we've been talking about, they're not damaged good. They're not disabled from the perspective that I'm taking with deafness being a superpower. They don't need all that hand holding. They don't need all of that coddling. They don't need these limitations put on them. They need the universe to be open wide to them. And some of the best ways that we can help is getting out of the way. Just getting out of the way and letting them see where they can go. We can be there as a resource. They can come to us if they have problems. They know where we are. They can find us, and we'll be helpful, but we don't need to run the show. I would say really allow them and let them do it. Otherwise, you have this concept of learned helplessness where they're constantly being told what to do and how to do it. So when they do turn 21 or 25 and come out of college, they don't know what to do because they haven't been doing it. Just to give somebody freedom right at the beginning. We see this in studies, say, incarcerated persons who have been in prison for great lengths of time. Many times when they get out, they'll reoffend so that they can go back into the system because it's predictable, it's what they know, it's what they're familiar with. For them to come out of that and don't have anybody, I don't know what to do. Where do I go? Who do I talk to? Where do I sleep? What am I do? They're very, very lost on that. So that learned helplessness, I think, is something that we really want to try to stay away from as much as possible.
Absolutely. And the biggest growth happens just outside our comfort zone. So if we are kind of trying to remove any discomfort or trying to make things too easy for our children or overcompensate, we are taking away from them that opportunity to learn and to grow and to feel that discomfort. Because also with that, it doesn't necessarily always feel great in the moment, but once they make their way through, there's a huge sense of pride that is really important. So one thing as a speech language pathologist, I work with schools and I sit in on a lot of annual review meetings for the IEP. And one thing I love is when the child is at the meeting because we are meeting about that child. So they should have a seat at the table, to use your analogy to make a practical. It's having that child physically there at the table, sharing what's working for them, sharing what isn't working for them, sharing what they need, because no one knows better than that child. So I think it's really important to include them, but also, as you had mentioned, eliminating that learned helplessness by putting them in situations where there might be a little discomfort. Obviously, as parents, we want to be there to fall back on if they need any help or any support, but letting them work through it, letting them fail a little bit so that they can learn and grow from it.
They're not as uncomfortable as you are. So the uncomfortableness is on the part of the parent. But going back to the IEP, what percentage would you say of your IEPs are is the child not present? Is that the norm that they're not there? So in those situations where they are there, who did that? Did the child advocate or did the parent advocate that their child be there?
So typically, I will say more times than not in elementary school, the children aren't at the meetings, and there's a variety of reasons. But in middle school and high school, I really am a huge proponent of every child should be at every meeting. So for our situation, for my son, he has sat on every meeting since I think sixth grade. But in general, I would say it's less than 10%. It's a really small number. And when I'm working with teenagers, I always encourage, like, if you're not in that invitation, this is a great time to practice that advocacy and tell them you want to be at your meeting. Because I don't know why it's not general practice, but it should be. It should be
It
general
should
practice.
be. It should be. Yes. That is a little concerning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, a patient needs to be there for the doctor to examine and put together the treatment plan. So, the kiddos need to be there. They need to be there.
Absolutely.
And I also think it would be good for the child to see this team of people that are there champion for them, wanting them to be successful. You have your audiologist here, you have your teacher here, you have your speech therapist here, you've got your parents here, you've got the team Taylor, as you would say, that are rooting for you. And that would be a sense of empowerment and encouragement for them. And by not having them there, that really does, that's part of the problem.
Hmm.
We don't mean for it to be, but that's part of the problem. It is almost a sign of disrespect, unintentional, of course, but it's just disrespectful to the process and not doing the child any favors.
Absolutely. And even obviously, it's important for practical reasons in terms of accommodations and all of that. But also, it's really important for the child's character building too, because they're seeing what it's like to advocate. They're seeing in real time how these conversations can work and being able to. Like for my son, it really gave him a strong sense of pride in taking ownership of his learning because he was invested. He was an invested member of the team versus a lot of times with children who aren't maybe at the meetings or aren't involved in these decisions. It's almost like, well, why should I? Like, why do I care? And they're not taking ownership of their own life.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
And I wonder if they think there's no need of me to be there because they already know what they're going to do. They're going to do whatever. So my being there isn't going to matter. It's not
Mhm.
going to change anything. And so, um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. So that's definitely something I encourage parents, but also in students, I encourage them request that the child is at the meeting because again, it's great practice for them for advocacy, but also no one's more invested in their or no one should be more invested in their education than them. So they deserve a seat at that table.
Hmm.
So, what's one message that you hope every parent leaves with? I know we've talked about quite a bit, but if you had to pick one, what would it be?
I would want your listeners of this podcast to come away with my child is not necessarily a person who needs to be fixed from that disabled medical model as much as my child needs a support team like any child would need around him or her to enable them to thrive in whatever educational setting they are and to be what they want to be as an adult and to follow the dream. I think that that would be the big advocacy to make sure that we did have team members on that team outside of just the clinical speech pathologist and audiologist, but some others know what are some of the strengths, what are some things we're seeing here, and helping to nurture those interests in that. Um, that the while I'm advocating that we don't see the child as something that is broken, needs to be fixed, we do need to do all we can to set up an environment for them to flourish. So that does mean identifying barriers and removing those barriers in terms of what they are. Make sure that we're not in education that we also focus on socialization, social skill, social capital, because many times a deaf person in a mainstream program may have that challenge. So what can come about? There was a story, was it up in New Hampshire or Maine, where there was a boy who was the only deaf child in his school, but the whole school learned sign language.
Mm-hmm.
All of the teachers, all of the, to communicate with him. But then they're going to go on and take those skills and use them in other places. So it wasn't necessarily just to fix him because he was broken, but by him being there, he started something that is just going to go far, far wider and beyond him. That's extraordinary. And those are the kind of things. But parents, and to not feel lost and to know that there are answers out there. So to look and to find and to pull that together. I do recommend universities, research universities where they can go, but they're going to get more of the clinical. But a part of that, they add in to the table deaf and hard of hearing people and others. And it's a great way to access some of those people because you can find enclaves of support groups of deaf people, but they might have one mindset. Again, as we had said earlier, no single deaf person represents all deaf and hard of hearing people. So being able to see all those so that you can find your tribe.
Yeah. And I am a huge proponent of everything is figure outable, meaning there is a solution to everything. We may not know what it is at the moment, but it's always worth exploring. Ask the questions,
Hmm.
try the things, take risks because um, there is a solution to everything. Because I know in the work that I do with advocating for parents, there's so many who feel backed in a corner or hopeless and helpless. And it's my heart goes to them because I know what it's like to feel like that, but keeping in mind that there is a solution. We might not know what it is in this moment, but we can figure it out.
Yeah. Um, the guy who invented the light bulb tried like 99 times before he got it right. WD-40 is named WD-40 because they tried 39 other ways and it didn't work. So on the 40th try, it worked. So I think we're used to going once, twice, maybe three times. After three times, we call it out and we want to change. But sometimes you have to do something more than three times to really to get that in there. But that's the difference too between victims and survivors, people having that resiliency. So if we haven't done the learned helplessness stuff and all those kind of things, become really, really resilient. And it is usually when we look at extremely successful people who have really made their mark on the world and changed things, really go back down into their history. There's a story to tell that something motivated them that nobody else had to deal with, and that's what prodded and kept them going. The run-of-the-mill people who don't have issues and problems don't change the world.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And I was listening to a podcast and I can't remember who it was to give them credit, but they said something along the lines of if you haven't failed, you haven't tried hard enough. Because
Hmm.
that's really what it is you are trying new things and maybe it's never been done before, and so of course we're going to fail. We don't know what we're doing, but it's the resiliency to get up, to try again, to put in the effort. And we're in a society, as with all things, there's a lot of great things about where we are in terms of technology and immediacy, but there is also this concept of immediate gratification. So a lot of times if it doesn't work that first or second time, that resiliency isn't in place to push the 39th, 40th, 100th time that might be needed for success. So yeah, I think sticking with it, continuing to try and pushing through that discomfort, allowing yourself the space to say, you know what, this is really frustrating, but picking yourself up and continuing on because there is a solution. Again, you just might haven't found it yet.
Yeah. The definition of success, so people think about achievement and getting things right, but the definition of success needs to be larger than that. It is a culmination or an amalgamation of many, many failures that help to strive you to get where you, penicillin.
Mhm.
You know, somebody didn't wash the flask. They messed up. They screwed up. And by the grace of God, we have penicillin to save lives. So, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Like called it a failure, but it was a pathway to lead to something so much greater.
Exactly, exactly. And so it's keeping those um situations and those experiences in mind to give you that boost in your resiliency to continue through. Because as you mentioned, like with penicillin, they could have really beat themselves up for, oh goodness, I forgot to do my job. I forgot to do what I needed to do. But really it was such a gift to modern society because of that failure, that mess up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have loved our time together yet again. I am so grateful to be able to have three thought-provoking, deep conversations with you. So thank you so much for your time. If you wouldn't mind reminding everyone where they can find you, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Safeandclear.com is our website. You can certainly go there. And of course, anyone can email me at Ann, spelled ANNE, .McIntosh, MCIN, T as in Tom, O, S as in Sam, H, at safeandclear.com. And I would welcome interaction and engagement and feedback with your listeners. What are some things that they're struggling with? Just kind of have a good powwow, come together, exchange some ideas, and see how each of us can move things forward for their children. We're at a real peak here with education because there's been a lot of budget cut. And so they're trying to make fewer dollars go over larger numbers of people, larger number of pupils. So when you have just a few in a class, and it takes more dollars for something, they really are struggling there. So what are some ways that we can work around that to remove these barriers so that everybody can get a good education? And sometimes that's not easy. Those are hard conversations to have for school board members and for principals and others that are looking at budget line items and so on and so forth. How do we make this work in that time frame?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you. You take care.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Parenthood Unscripted. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share it with another parent who might need it. You can follow along on Instagram at Parenthood Unscripted for updates, clips, and future guest announcements. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and I'll see you next time.